All right. Good evening. We'll be starting in about 1 minute here. Just thought I'd give you an opportunity to get your computers up and your screens going, and then we'll get started here in just a little bit. Guys, still see we're getting quite a few people logging in right now, and so we'll be starting here in just a minute or two. All right. Well, hey, good evening, folks. I just wanted to thank you for joining us this evening for the webinar. This one tonight is called The Top 3 Mistakes That Dentists Are Making That Are Killing Their Cash Flow. My name is Greg Vitke. I'm the COO of Dental Practice Solutions. And presenting tonight will be Deborah Seidel Vitke, the founder of Dental Practice Solutions and the Dental Consultant Master Academy, along with her colleague and friend Rick Williford. And Rick is the founder of the Williford Group as well as Dentimetrics. And Rick is also one of the co-founders of the Academy of Dental CPAs. In fact, as I'm looking at the list of attendees, I see Alan Schiff, the current president of the Academy of Dental CPAs, is on, so welcome, Alan. And he's also the other co-founder of the Academy. So the seminar we're going to be getting started with here today, we're going to be talking a little bit, Rick will get us started here in a little bit. And just to give you a little background on Rick, Rick has been for about the last 40 years specializing as a CPA working with dental offices, dentists, with the Williford Group. He's the guy that's going to be able to tell a dentist if he's going bankrupt in the next 3 months from now, if that's going to be the situation. But Rick's expertise will help you unlock the financial secrets in your practice. He's going to give you the facts about reverse engineering, how to be the most successful, and then Debbie will show you the areas to increase production without working harder. So we've got kind of the next screen we'll be showing you here is kind of a little overview of what we're going to be accomplishing here. So with that, we are going to also, at the end of the presentation of the webinar, there will be also a $500 gift certificate used to help as a practice analysis that will enable you to understand what is going on with your practice. So without any further ado, I'm going to introduce Debbie right now and let her lead into what's going on with the next steps.
Thank you, Greg. Well, as Greg mentioned, Rick is going to be talking to you first, and he's going to talk about how effectively you are measuring your numbers. And I will return to tell you how to move the needle on the numbers and improve some of the areas Rick will touch on. So Rick will talk about the mechanics of where you are in your practice financially, but where do you want to be? I want to ask you right now. Are you as good as you can be? Rick will be very objective and show you the facts if you don't like these facts. And I can assume most of you are on this call. You want to improve your practice numbers and you want to not work so hard, right? Rick is going to show us the tools to measure change in your numbers and look at areas which can have a powerful shift for your practice financially. And then I will come on and take these tools that he has for you and go into the future success areas of your practice and how you can create the change with your numbers. I will show you what is possible with the cold hard facts that Rick will show you. Rick will show you how to understand the P&L, your profit and loss, versus your cash flow. And this is only one piece of the entire pie. The numbers are not going to tell you, for example, that you have too many employees and why your payroll may be down at, well, maybe your payroll's at 40 or 50%. I mean, I've looked at offices in the last year that are at over 50% for the employee salaries. And that's not what we want for you. That is the part that I handle, and I can tell you how to get those numbers to be where they need to be so that you do have more cash flow and more money in your bank account. Rick's going to help you unlock the numbers, and then I'll show you the areas of your practice and how you can improve the practice management side of your dental office. And I'll also explain how you can make changes to improve your numbers. All hope, I want you to know, will not be lost when you see what Rick shares tonight, because I'm going to come behind Rick and I'll show you the way to change these numbers. Now, at this point in time, I'm going to turn it over to Rick, and he's going to start sharing with you all about your numbers. Are you there, Rick?
I'm always here, Debbie. Good evening, everybody. And a tip of the hat to Brother Alan Schiff on the line. Debbie and consultants understand the whys and the hows of what make the practice tick inside. But at the end of the day, most of you likely are going to say still, show me the money. And Vince Lombardi, the coach, said, if you're not keeping score, you're just practicing. So I want to help you keep score a little better. If you don't like numbers, you don't understand numbers, you're forgiven. 85% of the clients we deal with at least do not like numbers. They signed up to be healthcare professionals, not bean counters. But your name is on the door. Your retirement depends upon this. And so you have to know a little bit, enough to suspect what's going on. And I want to simplify it for you and give you some thoughts here. In the big picture, here's what your profit and loss statement essentially might say. You start with collections, checks, cash, credit cards, etc. And the collection pours over into the operating expenses, staff, supplies, lab, rent, general administrative would be 4 major categories, say. What's left over goes into the green bucket. That pays the doctor's fringes, his wages, travel, family, insurance, etc. And what's left is profit. So that would be nice and simple. Everybody can understand it if we could leave it that way. But our friendly IRS gets in the way, and your CPA is forced to do some voodoo accounting here, and that involves depreciation. Well, you never wrote a check for depreciation. You never saw depreciation, but that goes into the calculation of your net income or profit. How many of you have had your accountant at the end of the year perhaps say, Doc, congratulations, you've got $50,000 profit this year. You did great. And you say, baloney, I've got $3.12 in the bank. Where'd my money go? And so what I suggest is let's get rid of depreciation. And click one more time, Deb. In its place, I'm going to make the hair on Alan's hair curl up and other CPAs. I want to substitute loan payments. The note payment on your equipment, buying the practice, etc. That's not technically an expense as far as the IRS is concerned. It doesn't go on your tax return. And if it's not on your tax return, most CPAs don't care about this. They're preparing something primarily to do a tax return. We'll talk about that in a moment. But the fact is, it sure puts a dent in your checkbook if you've got to write $3,000 note payments every month that are not being reflected on your profit and loss statement. And so, Debbie, one more time. If we subtract the loan payments, once more, Deb, what we would get technically is not net income or paper profit, but you would get what we would call net cash flow. That would show you how much money theoretically went in and out of your checkbook during the year. But I'd like to go one step further. I'd like you to stop after the loan payments and look at what I would call net operating cash flow. because that's really where you should be focusing your attention in a sense. The consultant, frankly, doesn't care how much, quote, profit you have. We know how well the practice is running if we focus on net operating cash flow. You may end up with overhead of some number, let's say 60% of hardcore overhead before the doctor and things like that. Supplies, lab, staff, etc. might be 60%. And so you have 40% profit at the net operating cash flow level. And Debbie would say, Doc, you're hitting on all cylinders. That's fantastic. You're doing very, very well. The doctor then says, yeah, but I haven't got any money left. We say, aha. That's the bailiwick more perhaps of the financial planner and most likely your CPA as to what are you doing with your profit. Either you're spending too much money, which is not the fault of the management consultant, or if folks like Al and Schiff are doing their job, they are getting clever looking with the IRS in mind. They may have 4 of your children on the payroll. They may have you taking courses in exotic locations that are tax deductible if you meet the requirements, things like that. And so that's their area to try to minimize taxes. And that's where that depreciation voodoo comes into play. And some of you perhaps heard of Section 179, where you can take a huge write-off initially when you buy some equipment. But that's not the bailiwick of the practice management consultant. Their job is to say, Doctor, your practice is running fine. I don't dig into what you did with your profits. It's your decision to drive a Mercedes instead of a Yugo. And so that's what the big picture is. I focus on net operating cash flow, and you and your accountant, again, or financial advisor or whatever, look at what did you do with that cash flow. All right, Deb? So we're not going to look at profit, retirement plan, things like that. We're going to get you the money, the operating cash flow, and then you can decide quality of life, needs at home, or whatever, how to spend that money. All right, Deb? So this is what a typical profit and loss statement looks like. Straight out of the box, perhaps, when you buy QuickBooks or one of the other packages. They'll have fees collected, and then have all your expenses listed down the page in alphabetical order, accounting, advertising, etc., etc. And the reason this is set up this way is that coincidentally, it happens to match just about how things are done on a tax return. And I told you all along, most accountants, their primary purpose is to create financial statements, to do a tax return, and move on. I'm suggesting that you ought to have this redesigned into more of a management style P&L. Debbie, let's see that. And so this is what we would call categorized management format. A number of things are here. First of all, we've got fees charged at the top of the report. You say, what in the world are fees charged doing on my tax return or my financial report? The IRS doesn't care about that. That means, again, your typical CPA doesn't care about that. But what if you want to look at your collection percentage ratio? What if you want to look at how are the fees charged? What percent to the doctor? What percent to the hygienist? Now we're getting into understanding what's behind the numbers. We're not just pouring them into a tax return. And here's where you get into the area of what we would call dental CPAs. A typical CPA, their job is over once they have the P&L and they're ready to push a button and put those numbers into a tax return. To a dental CPA, their job is just starting. They're going to look at the numbers and ask the question, what if we don't like these numbers? What if you're out of line compared to other benchmarks? That's when we dig behind the scenes some. We may not know why they're out of line, but we can raise the red flag as the first line of defense and say everybody else is spending, let's say, 6% on dental supplies. Doctor, why are you at 8%? So I want to start with fees charged on your P&L. And the accountant has some tricks. They can put that on there and then subtract it back out, if you will, to neutralize it. But that total fees charged, you'll see in a moment, is an important number. Fees collected, of course, that's where we started before, your checks and cash, etc. But then we don't want to have your expenses splattered around alphabetically. If you guys have ever worked with a management consultant and they wonder, what's your total cost for payroll? Well, they've got to go through a regular alphabetized financial statement and dig up a half a dozen different numbers, because your payroll service fee is one place, your workers' comp insurance is in another place, your matching payroll taxes in another. All those things go into the grand category called personnel. So I'd suggest let's lump those numbers together under personnel. Now again, what I'm showing you here is just a skeleton. This report would still be 2 or 3 pages long, but we would have redesigned it to pull all your numbers together under personnel. A side note here is, under personnel, we would want to see not just wages, we'd want to see probably 3 categories of wages. How about wages-hygiene, wages-administrative, wages-clinical? Again, a consultant or a dental CPA would know what these various components should look like, and a really hot item here would be if under personnel you showed that hygiene wages for the year were $100,000. Since I've had you put fees charged up top, and I suggest you break them out by doctor versus hygiene, it doesn't take a mental gymnast to compare the $100,000 paid to the hygiene to see how well that matches with production by hygiene. In many parts of the country, we'd like to see maybe a 3-to-1 ratio. That is, a hygienist produces 3 times what you pay her. You guys in California, good luck with that. Sometimes you're lucky if they'll produce twice that. Also, up under fees charged, I'd like to show the gross fees charged and then subtract your adjustments, a big one being your PPO plans, Good Buddy discounts, etc. So we really get to net fees charged that are collectible. That's what we compare to how much you actually collected. Because if you're in network and contracted with some of the PPO plans, you can't bill 100% of your usual and customary fee. I mean, they won't pay it. And so don't pretend like you're going to. So we have a personnel category. I'd lump all of your personnel, wages, payroll, taxes, all that in there. Under production, pull together your dental supplies, lab fees, CIREC, implant parts, all that kind of stuff. Under facility, you'd have rent and building repairs, utilities, security, etc. Under general administrative, here's all the miscellaneous, including good old accounting fees, bank charges, electronic filing fees, office supplies, kind of miscellaneous in here. And perhaps in another seminar we could spend the time to dig into this in more detail and show you what the benchmarks should be for each of these categories. But I've got my total operating expenses here, and then come up with net income before other in the middle of the page. So we're starting to get towards that operating cash flow I talked about. We have other expenses, equipment and financing, associate, doctor fringe benefits. These are all tax deductions, but they aren't really a hardcore expense of the practice. For instance, under equipment and financing, what if you go to a study club and you're talking to some 65-year-old guy over in the corner, and he's bragging that his overhead is, let's say, 60%, could easily be 55%. Well, let's say it's 60%, and you're quietly thinking to yourself, oh my God, my overhead's 80%. What's going on here? Well, you've still got debt service, note payments to make, depreciation. The old guy hadn't bought anything new in 20 years. And so That's why I put this under other expenses. Your net income before other should be just as sparkling as his is if you're just looking at personnel, production, facility, etc., the real hardcore major expenses of your practice. Equipment and financing varies widely across the board from practice to practice. That doesn't tell you how well you're running your practice. Associate I put down here. I don't put the associate up with regular wages. And that's sort of a gray area. Associate is certainly, again, an expense of the practice. But think about this. Let's say you had two practices doing $1 million side by side. And let's say, to keep the math simple, your practice, you were solo, you took home 40% or $400,000 a year. Let's say the guy next door collects $400,000 profit, but he decides he doesn't want to work that hard. So he says, why don't I pay an associate to come in and work with me? I'll pay the associate $150,000. I'll take home what's left, that is $250,000. But to me, you had $400,000 to work with. The guy next door made a decision for quality of life. He chose not to do all the work himself. And I would argue he elected to take part of his so-called profit and pay an associate to do some of the work for him. And that's why I put that down there. And again, you couldn't compare the efficiency of those two practices if the associate was buried up with your other overhead items up above. Your doctor fringe benefits we like to break out separately so that you can essentially tell how much you're stealing from yourself. And that is, many, many years ago, we had a client come back from a Jim Pride meeting, and we discovered months later that the doctor was taking our financial statement, and back then check stubs, if you guys remember what those look like, and he'd spread those check stubs all over his kitchen table every month, and he'd go through and pick out how much was really disguised vacation, etc., to see what his true overhead was. We said, wait a minute, why don't we redesign our financial statements to do that for you? So now you can talk out of both sides of your mouth. You can go to the banker and say, banker, I think I'm really hitting it good. I've got tremendous expense control. If he leaves out his trip to Hawaii to take his annual CPR course, puts that down in this fringe benefits with all his insurance and things like that, he may tell the banker, banker, I've only got 55% overhead. If the IRS asks, he just kind of hang his head and roll his eyes, says, oh my gosh, my overhead must be running 85%. I'm not sure we're going to make it this year, Mr. IRS. So you can talk out of both sides of your mouth depending upon how you define, quote, overhead. But that's what I tell Dr. Charles Blair. He and I argue some about this. I think these other expenses are what I call voodoo expenses. They are not true operating expenses to run the machine. We then get down to net income before doctor and show the doctor's compensation, salary, his own payroll taxes down there, not up with the staff, to come up with your net taxable income. So this is a starting point. This is still not showing us that cash flow, but it shows net income broken out by some categories, and I'm going to show you in a minute what we're going to do with that. But I suggest if you have an outside accountant, get them to change to something like this. If you're dealing with a dental CPA already, I know that Alan in his office, he has what he calls a categorized management format like this. And so talk to your CPA. They should be able to change that for you. If you want to, you can send me a note that Debbie will give you my address again. It's on the cover slide of how to get in touch with me. And I can send you specifically how we do it in QuickBooks, account by account by account, and break this down. You could redesign that yourself if you're so inclined, or get your CPA to. If they don't do many dentists, they may be too lazy to do that. Say, well, we already have a template set up. I'm sorry. We're going to do it like we're doing it. A dead giveaway, for instance, is if you ever see cost of goods sold on your profit and loss statement, that's a template that wasn't designed for service professionals like dentists, because you don't sell products and have inventory and stuff like that. Okay, so Debbie, let's jump to the next slide. So look what I did here. I came up with a little flash report, I call it, and took those major categories I told you of staff is blue, supplies is yellow, facility or building was green, general administrative was red, and the payments are purple. If you have that categorized P&L to start with, you already have the subtotals for my four major categories: staff, supplies, building, G&A, and you know what your payments are. And so you could create a little flash report like this on a spreadsheet or whatever and track prior year, this year, and whatever your goal is, and not really have to dig into the official profit and loss statement. In fact, some accountants are starting to offer this as a kind of an interim item and just do the real financial report maybe once a quarter, something like that, because this really gives you 90% of the bang for your buck with only 10% of the effort maybe. This is not to say the net income or the P&L figures are not important. They're important primarily to the CPA so they can in fact do tax projections, things like that for you, and work with budgets possibly, because your personal expenses certainly are a substantial number. But as far as the efficiency and the effectiveness of your practice, I suggest you track these four overhead items and then the note payment. And that'll tell you the major items of your cash flow. Debbie, click one more time. Here's a question. Percent of what? Percent of production or percent of collections? When you see the ADCPA national reports and people like John McGill and other categories of folks and associations showing percent overhead, do they make it clear? Was that a percent of collections or a percent of production? Most folks are stuck as a percent of collections because that's how they set up their profit and loss statement, remember? I would argue, in a perfect world, you should measure your percent based on production as your benchmark. Back to our two practices doing $1 million a year. What if, in fact, that practice down the street, one of the reasons he brought an associate in is that, unlike your fee-for-service practice, he's eaten up with PPOs. He had to produce 1.5 million to collect the 1 million you're collecting. If you look at his supply bills and lab fees, etc., based upon collections, his supply bills are probably going to be about 9%. And he's raising Cain with the CPA, he's raising Cain with the consultant, he's raising Cain with the supply company, and anybody that'll listen to him. By golly, my expenses are too high in supplies. I read somewhere in dental economics 30 years ago that dental supplies should be 6%. Well, if he measured his expenses as a percent of that $1.5 million production, it would be 6%. Obviously, he's spending a lot more to run $1.5 million production practice than you are. So we tell folks, look, production creates overhead. Collection pays the bills. Don't fuss at your accountant or your practice management consultant or the dental supply company because they're right on target with your production. It's not their fault you failed to collect $500,000 because of the business model you're in. So I hope that makes sense. With the rearranged management style report we had before, we do have production there, and that's one reason I wanted it there. So you can then run your ratios off of that. Again, ask your CPA to do that. Some folks will get gung-ho enough to run it both ways. That is, measure your talking to you, Miss Debbie.
Oh, can you hear? We can't hear you, Rick.
Okay, how long ago did I cut out? 'Cause I see a network connection.
You were talking about percent of productions and why some will measure percent of productions and collections.
Oh, okay, good. So you didn't miss about 10 seconds, say.
No, 10
Okay,
seconds.
so go ahead and click on then.
Okay.
And so what I suggest is, if you do a little spreadsheet or have your accountant do this, why not take these, what we call stacked bar charts. These are much more informative than, say, the typical pie chart. Why not measure it both ways? Have a column for prior year, column in the middle for this year, and a column for a goal. And on the top graph, I'm measuring by percentages for benchmarks, but I'm also on the bottom measuring actual dollars. Both of those are interesting and equally important. Two more things while we're here that we would include in a flash report. Click on that, Deb. Remember that hygiene wage as a percent of hygiene production? You should know your hygiene wages every month. If you're using an outside payroll service, you don't have to wait for your accountant to tell you. You get a payroll report immediately after you run your last payroll for the month. What you should do is tell Paychex or ADP or whoever you're using, I'd like to set up departments in my payroll report. And they're thrilled to do that because all the big manufacturing groups they work with and other businesses, they're used to that. And so set up a department for doctor, set up a department for hygiene, a department for clinical, a department for admin, and immediately on your report, Shazam, you've got the dollars in gross hygiene wages. That's the number you want to know immediately to put into your financial flash report. You know the hygiene production from your computer software, and it doesn't take a rocket scientist to compare how am I doing. This guy's not doing so hot if 33% is in fact a realistic goal. He's paying 50% of hygiene production out in wages. Said in the opposite manner, the hygienist is only producing 2 times what she's paid. We said the golden benchmark should be 3 times perhaps. If that number is out of whack and your dental CPA knows what the number should have been, whether you know it or not, that's where he'll start sniffing around and say, hey, what's going on here? Is the hygienist overpaid? Is she working too slowly? Is her procedure mix wrong? Is she not doing soft tissue management? And here's where the CPA might be hand in hand with the consultant like Debbie to say, Debbie, I don't know what's going on here. We need some boots on the ground to go check it out, and you do some interviews. You stand behind the door and listen to hear how people talk. What's going on here? The second one down, lower right-hand corner, a little different. I'd suggest to get together with your accountant and your consultant, one or the other or both. Why not come up with a break-even figure? And let's track that during the year versus your collections. And this break-even answers the question not only how much does it take to keep the doors in the office open, but I want to add to that, how much does it take to keep the doors to your house open? In other words, what's your personal break-even every month to pay your own fixed bills at home, plus the office overhead? And so it's easy enough to track this in your little spreadsheet you would do. So if you collect less than your break-even on a cumulative basis, you know there's a train wreck coming. You won't be able to fund your retirement plan. You won't be able to pay your income taxes on time. And unfortunately, you can fake it for a couple of years until the IRS and time catches up to you, and then the chickens come home to roost. If you're up in the green area and you're collecting more than break even, then take your bride out for pizza and celebrate then. All right, next slide. So that flash report is part of a larger report that Debbie uses, and Alan does to some extent too. And this is Dentometrics. This is an automated system to extract data out of your dental software every month and give you some dashboards. And the 85% of you who hate numbers at least might not mind colors. I have an engineering background from Georgia Tech and CFP after my name, an MBA and CPA, and I'll be honest with you, I still like pictures rather than numbers. The pictures are so handy because you can see easily red, yellow, and green. If you're on the way to the golf course and everything is green, have a nice day. End of conversation. You don't need to dig through. And so it doesn't take how you're doing. And each of these items is compared against a goal. Let's say you're doing $1 million. Is that good or bad? If you are only hoping to do $900,000, you're elated to do $1 million. What if you're hoping to do 1.2 million and you're only doing 900? Not so elated. So it doesn't take a lot to put together some budgets or goals for your practice. And there again, that's where a consultant like Debbie typically holds your feet to the fire, because it's no fun to do goal setting. But once a year, she can beat you up and spend a couple of hours and, doctor, how many days are you going to work each month? And that type of thing. And you may not know exactly, but you sort of know you're going to go to Italy for 2 weeks in October. Well, we won't have as many work days that month. So let's put those numbers together and see, will that generate enough revenues to hit that break-even point we talked about. In the middle, it's fun to see 2 years at a glance real quickly. Red is this year, month by month by month, the top line. The dotted line is growing and shows you your cumulative for the year. And notice the red line, fortunately, is above the blue line, which was last year. You don't need to run a bunch of reports out of Dentrix to see this immediately. You've got the case acceptance in the upper right-hand corner. Coming down on the right, you have an 8-week scheduled versus goal. This is a fascinating early warning system. You may be doing fine right now, but how's it looking out in the future? It takes a lot of work sometimes to get that out of your dental software. If you can get it at all, it's not worth the trouble. Well, this gauge is showing you how are we doing. Sliding back to the left, third one down is accounts receivable aging by percent. Red is not good. Red is over 90 days. Easy to spot, though, compared to prior year. This year's red is getting better, and we're getting closer to the goal. That's the fascinating advantage of graphs over reams and reams of numbers. You can see the trends. The green is what you and the consultant decided you're comfortable with in the so-called current. Blue would be over 30, etc. In the middle, you've got some production by procedure groups that Debbie would watch compared to the goal you set. The green plus blue is the entire hygiene department, but what's nice is the green is typical prophies, the blue is soft tissue management, perio-related procedures. And you can see the blue is growing throughout the year. Red is crown and bridge, whether it's just plain old PFM or whether it's implant supported or veneers, any lab related kind of procedure. And you see the crown and bridge is growing over the year. Way off to the right, you've got your procedure groups by percentage. You've got the goal on the right, this year actual in the middle, and prior on the left. Way down to the lower left is a fascinating number you just about can't get out of your software. The red shows us what percent of your active patients, active being 18 months, what percent of your active patients have never had a hygiene or perio appointment. They're not in your recall system. It's imperative to have a strong recall system. Whoop, Debbie, your finger slipped. Because it's imperative to get as many folks as you can in recall. The red on the right, the goal shows 15%, because that's probably about as good as you can do to keep the consultants happy. You have emergencies. You have people came in with a tooth whitening coupon, stuff like that. So you can't ever get all the red out. but you sure want to get close to that, because as you may know, and Debbie will beat up and tell you, 80% of all your new cases come through the hygiene department. You've got a tremendous racket going. You can force floor traffic through your office every 6 months or so. And so you always get a chance to examine a patient, what's broken, what's going wrong, etc. So about 80% of all new treatment comes through the hygiene department. If you don't have folks coming through your hygiene, you're not just losing some prophy fees, but you're losing production. In the middle bottom, showing your number of new patients. The dotted line is a goal you and someone like Debbie perhaps would have set up, 25 patients a month in this case. And the height of the column, of course, tells you how many you had, but more importantly, you have green plus blue. Green tells you how many of those new patients came from internal sources, your own staff, the doctor, patients who are bragging about you. That's who you want 75 to 80% of your new patients to come from. Not the internet, not the yellow pages, not somebody just driving by, because those guys are tire kickers. They have no idea what your fee structure is like, etc. The folks in the green perhaps already know. So Debbie, how about the next page? Here the highlight to me is in the middle, all those colored area graphs there. That's where red is your fee for service, and I'm tracking the 5 major PPOs you're in. And so again, at a glance, you can see how much you're into PPOs. Were you trying to get rid of MetLife or something? You're down the street from a military base and you decide to start cutting that back. Well, how effectively are you at doing that? You can see a picture here to show you. Straight down in the middle, that one blue solid line, that shows you what your adjustments are. And Denometrics is tracking your top 10 adjustments. So you can very quickly get a rough idea of how much do we produce for Delta. Hey, that number's going up and we're excited. But you can see what your production or your adjustments are and say, wait a minute, it's what I have left over that counts. PPO is sort of like eating soup with a fork. You may be doing a lot of it, but how much are you keeping? And this report will tell you at a high level view which of your plans is more profitable and less profitable to get rid of. And around the perimeter you have the various other hygiene, percent of gross production, etc., etc. And there are other reports and graphs, but that'd be a whole other meeting. Just wanted to give you an overview of what some of the modern folks are doing to look not just at your financials, show me the money, but what's going behind, how do we generate the numbers? And here's where Debbie would be looking to see, where are you inefficient? What can we improve? Because remember, this is just like a thermometer only. By only, I mean it just tells you the temperature. It doesn't tell you what to do if you don't like the temperature. That's where the consultant or advisor comes in and says, which of these needles are out of whack, and that we could move and perhaps provide you some growth. So, how about that, Deb?
Oh my gosh, very thorough, Rick. I would say that you took up a lot of the hour and we barely scratched the surface here. So, Rick, if you're up for it, I think we need to have another webinar next month where, you know, I want to walk us through what has Rick shown us here today so that I get to talk more about the services and systems that are going to turn up the needle on profitability in their dental practice, and especially with the ones that I'm working. I want to show them. I've got some slides here to show them what's going on. And, you know, I just wanted to say, Rick, about the Denometrics. Well, first of all, on page 10 of their handout, I have given everybody who registered the handout link, and on page 10 is a gift certificate from Denometrics. And if you have, I think it's just Dentrix right now, but I'm pushing Rick, I'm putting a lot of pressure on him to get EagleSoft and some other software into Denometrics. So I have about 4 clients right now that we've, you know, because of Denometrics, I've been able to do some analysis and now meeting with the doctors, and I can tell you that it makes life so much easier for me as a consultant to have this tool. I'm meeting with several doctors over the next 2 weeks to let them know what I see through the dentametrics. They have Dentrix and they wanted to do an analysis. So I can see some very interesting trends going on, because with just Rick sends them a link, they click on it, it gets into their, it's on their desktop, and they update that, and then it's sent to my desktop, and I'm looking at doctors' numbers from the previous year and this year, and right away, just looking at the top lines of the key metrics, I can see that their numbers, my doctors, the reason why they've called me for an analysis is because their numbers are way down. Way down. And I can see right away that one of the offices has hired previously a phenomenal hygiene consulting group, which is what I do. I specialize in hygiene consulting, but I've trained myself through other consultants and courses how to look at the numbers. And now I have so much less work with dentametrics. When I look at the numbers, I don't have to do the calculations. With dentametrics, the numbers are just like you see right in front of you. So helpful to me. But what I've seen that's very interesting.
A metaphor I use is dentametrics is sort of like 3D cone beam compared to your old X-ray machine.
Absolutely. It's just the difference between taking regular X-rays, and I had to go into the dark room and wait, and then I had to run back to get them and mount the X-rays. And now everything is just right in front of me with the push of a button, just like pushing the X-ray machine's button and the digital X-rays right in front of you to view. And it's just beautiful. I love having it. I just want to say that for those of you who have Dentrix, if you don't take advantage of this to take a look at the numbers, it's just a great tool for both you, the dentist, and myself as a consultant to have, so that I can help you manage your practice to change the dial on those numbers and get you to Italy or driving that Porsche if that's what you want. But I'm looking at some numbers right now, and as I was saying, there have been a lot of hygiene consultants that have come into our world over the last 20 years. They're my colleagues, and they've done an excellent job showing 3 of these offices that I'll probably be working with. They've got a high percentage of perio patients that have gone through the practice. However, the inefficiency that I just now see right now very clearly in front of my eyes because of dentametrics, I don't have to go in there and do my Excel documents with the formulas. Right, the first thing I see is that their recare measurement is way down. So that tells me right now that those patients came through, they had the scaling and root planing, but for some reason they did not understand the value of continuing routine preventive periodontal maintenance after scaling and root planing was completed. So this is what I've been the expert on and working on, because everybody wants to be the hygiene consultant. There's so many of us that are hygiene consultants, and their specialty is enrolling your patients in a periotherapy. I wanted to have my own niche, and so I chose a while back recare. And voila, here's dentametrics to show me right with the click of a button. And I'm seeing it happening now. And ironically, it's the first time I've seen this over my 15 years of consulting. What I usually see is that they're missing profitability in the hygiene department, because I would go into offices and evaluate, I'd audit the charts, and I would see 5-millimeter pocket depths with bleeding on probing. And they were just waiting and watching. And so we would go through the protocols and what is going to be the protocol for that office to enroll patients in periodontal therapy. Oddly enough, for the first time ever, I've got 3 offices now who have a protocol for periodontal therapy. However, I'm thinking that possibly the communication, the elegant communication, for those patients to understand that oral health is related to their total health, and that by preventing disease and maintaining the healthy mouth is so valuable and so important. I used to be a hygienist in Newport Beach, California, and everybody, if you know Newport Beach, it's like the Beverly Hills of Orange County, California, and everybody wants to have perfect teeth. And when I sat and talked with my patients eye to eye, knee to knee, and explain to them that their health, their oral health is related to their total health, they sat up and listened. Anything that we said that they needed to have done to their mouth, they wanted to have a perfect mouth. So they continued to come in. And that doctor is so busy, and he's probably going to be retiring shortly. So he's so busy that he doesn't want his practice to grow. And if you miss a dental hygiene appointment, God forbid, you can't get in for another year because they're so overbooked. That's another problem in itself. But I want to ask you, if you're on this webinar, do you want to increase profits in your dental hygiene department? Do you want to eliminate no-shows? Do you want to see those lost patients return to your office? Because these are the easiest ways to, and the most cost-effective for you as a dental practice in operating procedures to increase your profitability. You know, I heard Rick talking about, I think you were talking about lab fees and, you know, cost of this, and also about PPOs. I heard you specifically talk about this practice doing 1.5 million, and I've analyzed practices this year who had a lot of PPOs. They were writing off 30% of their production because of the fee adjustments from these insurance companies. And so if you have a hygiene department that functions with the highest end of profits, meaning that you don't have all these last-minute cancellations and no-shows and lost patients, and you can talk to them about some of these other same-day services, you're going to be less likely to lose so much money. You know, Rick talked about this office as an example that they wanted to produce 1.5 million, but their collections were probably $1 million because 500,000 was eaten off in adjustments, and they missed out on these patients understanding that this is not only what they need, but have the elegant communication skills during treatment planning to discuss something in a way that the patient wants to have that. And they feel a need to not leave without scheduling a next appointment. They feel like they're in a panic if they have to change a hygiene appointment because they know they can't get right back in the next day. And cancellations, talking about cancellations, this has been an epidemic. I mean, I have had dentists calling me for 5 years now, since 2010 for sure. Dentists have been calling me saying, look at this hemorrhage. Look at my schedule. Look at all these holes. And I'm still seeing it today. I'm still seeing it in my backyard. I now live in Portland, Oregon, in a suburb, and I see it happening so much. Offices call me from all over the nation, including Canada, and it's something that is an epidemic. And how can you overcome this? Well, here are a few solutions. We're going to have to go into this on another topic because I only have a few minutes left. But first of all, number one is new patients need to understand your cancellation policy. I recommend when I work with an office that they have they require 72 hours notice to cancel an appointment, and they cannot leave a message on an answer machine to leave a cancellation notice. They have to actually speak to somebody live, or it's not considered an official cancellation. So imagine if you're closed on Friday, and then you have a 48 or 24-hour cancellation policy. That patient can call and leave a message on the machine. It happens to every office I ever talk to. And so what we're doing in Dental Practice Solutions, my team, we're changing that by having the doctor have a special message on their answer machine that says you cannot cancel. We do not take cancellations by a left message on this machine. And the patients know, they understand a cancellation policy. And it's that elegant communication. The hygienist is engaged in elegant communication, elegant words, because they can paint pictures of living a longer, healthier life. And also is pre-scheduling at least 98% of all hygiene appointments. That's another inefficiency in these offices who the patients went through the periodontal therapy program, but they didn't schedule They didn't pre-schedule them. And I was in an office recently observing, oh, well, I was coming there to meet the doctor for a meeting, and I was sitting in the reception area and I was observing. I hadn't met the team yet, and I'll tell you, I saw those team members. I was sitting in that reception area 10 minutes, and I saw the team members just dropping the patients off. You know, God forbid, I've worked in other offices when I was starting to consult, and I would observe the team members having the patients walk to the front office with a chart, and that's something I see all the time. This office, I just saw them dropping them off and not talking about a next appointment. The patient just left as they dropped them off. So it's very important that if you want to have patients enrolled into treatment plans, if you want to see your patients back again on routine visits, that you build value. And I also suggest some incentives for patients to come back for their hygiene appointment. Reward your patients. They're thinking, what's in this for me? The other thing is a short call list, and I don't have a lot of time to go into this, but there's a way, and I'm going to invite you to click on a link at the end of our webinar, because if you're interested in learning more about eliminating cancellations, I can schedule 20 minutes with you, and we can go over the short. You'll learn more about how to automate the short list. So if you have a cancellation, there is a way to get somebody on your schedule within 90 seconds if you have a cancellation. So I'm not going to go into that tonight, but you can you know, give me through the form that you'll get. It's an automated form. It'll just take you 60 seconds. Let me know you're interested, and we'll give you a call to schedule that. But this is one of the incentives that's worked really well for our clients, is the free whitening. And I have created an entire system. It's called Forever White. And on page 9 of your handout, it is a special customized bleach that I can get for you for 100 syringes. You get a lot. It's over $400 value, but because you attended this, you can get those syringes customized for your office. They're larger size syringes. Same gel that you're probably ordering right now. I mean, you know, carbamide peroxide is carbamide peroxide. Hydrogen peroxide is the same as hydrogen peroxide no matter where you go. So that's there for you to take a look at. But implementing the Perio program, maybe a lot of the offices that are on this call right now don't have a strategy and a format for all their hygienists to be on the same page with a perio patient. A lot of times when I'm in the office, I'm dealing with it right now, where one hygienist is saying it's a 7, and then the patient went to another hygienist, and guess what? That hygienist said it was a 3-millimeter pocket. That's a huge discrepancy. And so there needs to be a philosophy of care for the periodontal patient, and that's what I love. I just enjoy doing that. And here's what happens to our clients. I've mapped this out over the years, over my 15 years of working with clients, and I started out only doing hygiene. And a traditional prophylaxis, which is what we saw in the very beginning back in 2000, most offices, most of their patients, like I say, I saw a lot of 5-millimeter pockets, and it was just wait and watch, bleeding on probing, and patients who hadn't been perio-charted in 3 and 5 years. But then when we work with our teams, oh, you know, we set a goal for 3 months, and then they'll move forward. You know, maybe they're doing $164,000 for one hygienist annually, and that's a very, you know, I go low with my numbers here when I'm showing examples, but if you're just doing a prophy on all your patients, which a lot of offices still are, that hygienist is like Rick was talking about. They're not at that one, their salary is going to be more like, you know, 50 or 75% of what they're producing. And I've worked with doctors who are in the negative. They're paying their hygienist more than what the hygienist is producing each day because they're in a very bad area. It's an area where there's such a huge economic decline still. So we have a philosophy of care that will get you back to optimal implementation for your perio patients, as well as showing you how to implement same-day services and do it in a timely manner so that you don't feel like you're on a treadmill, but we show you a special management of time. Just wanted to review with you my clients and what they've done. In 3 months, over 3 months, I had a new client in Canada, and she had just started her own. It was a startup practice. She had 4 patients a month, and her average production was only $32,000 after 18 months, and she did not have a hygienist. She used to be a hygienist, now she's a doctor. And 3 months later, she went from 4 new patients a month all the way up to 18 patients a month that were new to her practice. And that was because of the ReCare, the system that we set up for her, which I can share with you more if you want to check that off in your form that you'll go to. Her average production at the end of the year was at $48,000 each month. And she had a hygienist, and for the first day that she had a hygienist, the first day of hygiene, produced $1,757,000. Imagine that in Canada. And that's US dollars, by the way. Treatment scheduled from that first day of hygiene, in addition to what she might have found on her schedule, was $4,525. Pretty good return, right? And that was just 3 months of working with us. This is another client in Seattle who just purchased a practice from an older dentist who had been in that practice for over 40 years. And he basically, that older doctor, kind of just didn't want to be a dentist anymore, and he thought since he's retiring, he never even scheduled the next appointments for hygiene or whatever. He did his own hygiene because he was getting ready. He was gearing down to retire, so he actually, instead of boosting his practice up, he just drove it into the ground, and this young doctor came and bought it. But he had to rebuild all the practice numbers and the patient numbers as if it was a new practice. Imagine that. And then 4 months later, with what we implemented, he was listed #1 on Google. His new patients went from 3 or 4 a month to 20. And by the way, they very seldom have a patient that cancels a hygiene appointment. So their net production increased by 40% over the last 4 months. And he also hired his first hygienist now. It was during that period of time that we were working with. I'm really proud to say that the least return of production increase we had with our clients last year was 34%. And it's amazing how the Dentametrics allows me to work with the doctor, and very easily we both can review the Dentametrics numbers and see where we have inefficiencies and capture that right away. So I know that you're at the hour. I want to honor your time. I want you to click on this website that I have up here, because I'd like to hear from you. We need to have another webinar, Rick, next month, because I didn't get a chance to really get into this material that I have. So we do have a couple of questions too, but while we're answering the questions, please go to this website here. And I think I have a way here that I can click so that I can take them there at the end. Let's see, can you get me back there? Okay, so we have some questions. Oh, it's in. You can see it's in your chat box as well. That I'm asking you to go to. Where is that at? Right here. Oh, it's in your chat box as well. That I wanted you to go to that link with our survey. And if you want more things, like you want more information on the cancellations or anything else, we want to also hear what you want to hear next month more about. We have questions. Greg, people have been asking questions while we've been talking.
Yeah, I've had a couple come in, Rick. I'm going to direct the first one to you. Do you have a way on the financial flash reports to track productions by the staff? So I've got, looks like this guy has 3 hygienists. He wants to be able to track their production to goals that he has set. Can you do that on a flash report?
Well, there are 2 or 3 things getting commingled there. In Dentametrics, yes, you can have an unlimited number of dentists and hygienists or other producers in the Dentametrics, and each one has a tab, essentially in a worksheet and their own graphs. That's where I'd turn to that level of detail. If you chose to, in your profit and loss management report, you could certainly have it coded into QuickBooks if you'll make the entries or give the entries data to your CPA or whomever. That could be done, because some of our clients do that as well. So I'm not sure which report he's talking about. But that's two ways to do it. And Alan Schiff wanted to remind me, by the way, to tell you that if you want to check out the resources around the country and see who our members are in the Academy of Dental CPAs, you can go to adcpa.org. And there's two events also shown there. Our tax-deductible resort seminar coming up in St. Martin's, first week of February, and first week of August, we're heading over to Kauai if you're looking for a tax deduction to beat the old IRS there.
I'm going to be there, Rick. That's my birthday.
I got you.
I'm going to be in Kauai.
Hey, another question too, Rick, for you. That categorized management format that you have.
Yes.
Now, is that just exclusive to the dental world?
How do you mean?
Well, would this be applicable in other types of venues? I'm not sure where this person came, but looks like they have a vision location so they were just wondering, is this a format that could be used as other type of healthcare?
Yeah.
It sounds like.
Yeah, I would think each industry has their own indices they track, their metrics. I imagine they're a member of a trade association that puts out what's the average cost of materials, et cetera, and he could redesign his P&L that way. And again, if folks want to send me an email and get a more detailed sample of that, the simplest email on the telephone to give you would be rickwcpa@gmail.com. rickwcpa@gmail.com, and with other questions, etc.
Cool. Now, there's a question that came in for Debbie. It's do you actually work with Dentametrics then, and what software again are they currently is Dentametrics working
Okay,
with?
good question. So currently Dentametrics only syncs with Dentrix. However, I know Rick has been working fast and furious, I believe, with EagleSoft. So right now it's very simple. I ironically have had a lot of Dentrix clients. It just happened. I've had some others as of this year, just in the last week, that don't have Dentrix. So I do have my own Excel formulas that I do, and it's just nice to see all the bar graphs. So can you expand on that, Rick?
Patterson has agreed to give us the hooks into EagleSoft, and so depend upon how quickly they get that to us. We're waiting on them. Rough guess, we're hoping for maybe 3 months because it takes quite a bit of testing and that type of thing. But that order of time frame.
Cool.
Then SoftDent and all would follow after that.
Oh, very nice, very nice. Thank you. Any other questions?
Yeah, and the last question was, as a dental consultant client, if you are hired, does the Dentametrics, is it included in your fees?
Oh, that's a very good question. Yes, it is included in the fee. There's no extra charge for that. However, so one of the things that's very unique, and I know Alan Schiff's on here, and I've never met you personally before, Alan, so we'll have to chat some other time, but I've been working with many of the dental CPAs now, and it's very helpful. We've been able to collaborate with their clients because they can see the numbers, but they don't know how to move the dial on those numbers. And so it works really well if I can look at their clients' numbers with Dentrix, the clients of the dental CPAs who have Dentrix right now. When I can look at their client numbers, I know right away what needs to be done. For example, those 3 offices I was just talking about, we could see right away. It's the first time I've ever seen such high perio, but low as far as the recare, and that was very easy to see. So I hope that answers the question. Okay, I guess that's all for our questions. So I would like to redirect all of you to that. I'm going to, hopefully all of you will come over to the website that I redirected you to, and thank you so much for joining us, and we will see you hopefully on next month's webinar. I think I'm going to try to twist Rick's arm for Wednesday, February 11th. So check the website, dentalpracticesolutions.com, and we'll have more information up there in a couple of weeks regarding the next webinar. Right, Rick? You're going to join me next month. We got more to talk about. Thank you. Thanks for joining me. Good night.